Roll call.
Roll call for day 16, Wednesday, February 1st, 2023. Anderson? Here. Baldwin? Here. Barlow? Here. Beitman? Beitman here. Boner? Here. Bouchard? Here. Brennan? Here. Case? Present. Cooper? Here. Dockstetter? Here. Ellis? Present. French? Here. Murphy? Here. Guru? Here. Hicks? Here. Hutchings? Here. Ide? Here. Jones? Here. Kinski? Here. Cole? Present. Landon? Here. Larson? Here. McEwen? Here. Nethercott? Pappas? Here. Rolfus? Here. Salazar? Here. Schuler? Here. Scott? Here. Steinmetz? Here. President Driscoll?
Here.
31 present.
Thank you. Prayer by Reverend Mark Marston, First United Methodist. You here? Baldwin, I guess I was told that. I don't know whether to call you a reverend or not. We're going to call you something.
Don't call me reverend. Don't call me that either. Okay, members, let's pray. Our kindest Heavenly Father, we come to Thee today with gratitude for our ability and our opportunity to be here. We give You thanks for the responsibility that we've been given to form these thoughts and these statutes and the ideas that we have for the state and the great citizens of the state of Wyoming. We give You thanks for the health of each one of us that are here today, and we pray for our ability to maintain that health and for our ability to think clearly today as we work through our agenda. We pray for all those who work with us here today, the staff and all who work here with us, and we ask a blessing on the other body as well, that together we can work and form good ideas and make good decisions. We ask a blessing to attend us today, that we'll be able to be well, think well, and be courteous and kind, and remember each other, that we each have difficulties and struggles in our life, and be respectful of one another. We ask all these blessings and the blessings to be with us here today in this chamber, in the name of our Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Senator Baldwin. Senator Hutchings, would you, is she here? Sure.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Senator Hutchings. Do we have the journal ready?
Mr. President, your Journal Committee reports that the Journal of January 31, 2023 has been read and recommends that it be approved. Senator Larson, Chairman.
Are there any objections? Being none, the report is adopted. Senator Barlow, could you give us a lambing and kidding report?
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to report that the crew is still performing admirably. All lambs are present and accounted for. And with the permission of the chairman this present afternoon, I'll actually ask staff to post a couple pictures to lighten our mood at some point on a break. Because nothing but lamb pictures to kind of make people
We would like that,
better.
but we need a
Thank
little
you.
more detail. Twins and triplets today?
I have not actually looked at my update, so I do not know that, Mr.
Okay,
President.
thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think that's a good idea as long as they're not bad pictures.
Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
So just to give everybody a little purview of where we're at and what we're going to try to get done today, we're still, staff is still collating and processing budget amendments. So what we'll do is we'll do second reading. And if we get through second reading and the budget amendments are ready, Mr. President, we'll jump right into the budget and second reading on the budget. My plan is to get through the budget today with all the amendments. And so if we do get through there, we will do a short session of general committee of the whole, Mr. Chairman, and try to get a few more of those Senate files out on the floor. So that's kind of the process we're looking at today. Plan on going to about 6 o'clock tonight to get that done. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Majority Floor Leader. And further on to that is tomorrow is going to be another amendment day. and we're going to do it different than we did this time. Your amendments need to be in by 5 o'clock tomorrow night, and you need to have a request to have them numbered by 7 o'clock. We've got all kinds of them that didn't get numbered this time. We need to have them numbered. Staff stayed up till midnight last night, and they came again at 5 this morning, and we're not going to kill our staff. So you need to, if you're going to have an amendment go in, you need to ask them to have it numbered, assuming they have it ready, and there may be some that aren't. But if they have it ready, you need to ask them to number it by 7 o'clock so we can get it out. AM. So we're gonna be pretty hard on it. Senator Ellis,
Thank you, Mr. President. May I have privilege of the floor?
you may.
Mr. President, Senator Case and I would like to introduce you to Councilwoman Returns to Work. She's the co-chair of the Northern Arapahoe Business Council.
Very honored to have you come. Please come again. We like seeing you. Thank you. Senator Cooper,
Privilege of the floor, please.
granted.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to have a little reality check as we go into our budget spending today and keep some things in mind. In Wyoming, we have 3 grades of oil that are very germane to what we do here. We run on West Canadian Select, which is most of the heavier oils in the northern part of the state. We run on Wyoming sour pricing, which is obviously sour crude, and Wyoming sweet, which is the rest of the state. And then our third oil and gas issue is the price of natural gas. These prices all peaked in June and have come back down considerably since. We need to think about that as we enter next year. Western Canadian Select is currently at $57.62, down from $101. Wyoming Sour is currently at $71.93, down from $113. Wyoming Sweet is at $72.48, down from $114. And NYMEX natural gas is $2.52 this morning, down from $9.68. That's a decrease of 74%. So we need to keep these numbers in mind as we're moving forward and thinking about the next year or two. These windfalls that we saw this year are most likely not going to be here next year from oil and gas. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for the information. Senator Ellis,
Thank you, Mr. President. May I also have one more privilege of the floor?
you may.
Senators, up in the balcony over here, we have Leadership Cheyenne. This is a local group that does a lot of community and service projects throughout our state, or throughout the city of Cheyenne. And just want to welcome their class here. I think they're here to watch some good debate today.
They're here. Senator Dockstader, you wanting something? Okay. Messages from the House.
From the House of Representatives, message number 175, January 31, 2023. Mr. President, the House adopted the Committee of the Whole reports failing the following bills by the votes indicated. House Bill number 129, Wyoming Private Employees Retirement Savings Plan. Ayes 24, noes 36, excused 2. Message number 176, January 31, 2023, House Bill number 206, State Employee Child Care. Ayes 16, noes 46. The bills have been indefinitely postponed. Signed, Katie Talbot, House Chief Clerk.
Thanks, Randy. Reports from standing committee, reports from standing committees. That was it. All right.
January 31, 2023, Mr. President, your committee number 3, Revenue, to whom was referred Senate File 159, Stop ESG, Eliminate Economic Boycott Act, respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes Senators Beitman, French, Ide, and Pappas. Excused Senator McEwen. Senator Beitman, Chairman. January 31, 2023, Mr. President, Committee Number 3, Revenue, to whom is referred Senate File 172, Stop ESG State Funds Fiduciary Duty Act. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Beitman, French, Ide, and Pappas. Excused, Senator McEwen. Senator Beitman, Chairman. January 31, 2023, Mr. President, Committee Number 3, Revenue, to whom is referred Senate Joint Resolution 13, Legislative and Executive Authority Taxation and Spending. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Beitman, French, and Ide. No, Senator Pappas. Excused, Senator McEwen. Senator Beitman, Chairman. February 1, 2023, Mr. President, Committee Number 10, Labor, Health, and Social Services, to whom is referred Senate File 151, Wyoming Prescription Drug Transparency Act. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Bouchard, Dockstader, and Hutchings. No, Senators Baldwin and Barlow. Senator Baldwin, Chairman.
Thank you, Randy. Today in Wyoming history, this is a good one. Town of Buffalo gets running water. Any guesses to what year? 1889. Quote for the day: teamwork is the ability to work together towards a common vision, the ability to direct individual accomplishments towards organizational objectives. It's the fuel that allows common people to attain uncommon results. That's the sausage machine we're in, folks. Second reading on budget bill. Friday is the last day for bills to be reported out of the committee in the House of Origin. So if you've got one of your bills that's hung up in a committee chairman here, go see them about getting it out, because if it's after Friday, it's the same as the Jordan bill. So I think we're getting them all out, but I want to make sure everybody's aware of that. Bills on second reading. Senate File 43, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 43, EMS Districts.
Senate File 43 having been read two separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 101, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 101, Wyoming Legal Tender Act Amendments.
Senate File 101 having been read two separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 111, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 111, Child Abuse Change of Sex.
Senate File 111 having been read two separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 120, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 120, Restoration of Civil Rights.
Senate File 120 having been read two separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, is so ordered. Senate File 127, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 127, Wyoming Stable Token Act.
Senate File 127 having been read two separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, is so ordered. Senate File 129, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 129, Background Checks, Governor's Office.
The bill has an amendment. Can we have the amendment read in?
Senate File 129, second reading amendment number 1, page 2, line 5, after.
Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 129 and would ask the body to vote aye. Mr. President, I think this would clean up and just kind of tighten up the purposes for which the governor is seeking to have this authorization to have background checks. Many of you may know I went to law school in the state south of us, and while I lived there, I remember a really contentious issue where you had a governor's race, and one of the governor's candidates was using background checks and criminal investigations for political purposes. And, certainly would never imply that our governor would do that in Wyoming, but for future governors, we just want to make sure that the purpose of this is for the governor to obtain criminal background checks for employees, interns, and applicants within the governor's office, not to be used for political purposes. So this just tightens up that language. I'd ask for your aye vote.
Question being called. We're voting on second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 129. All in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment is passed. We're back on the bill. Senate File 129 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 132, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 132, Study of K-12 Education Program.
Senate File 132 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 139, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 139, Unlawful Use of a Charge Card or Debit Card.
Senate File 139 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 143, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 143, Wyoming Freedom Scholarship Act 2.
Senate File 143 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third? Senator Simon, excuse me. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 143 and ask for your favorable consideration.
Could we have the amendment read in, please?
Read it in, please,
I'm
and
sorry.
then I'll move it.
That's my bad. I didn't catch it on the file.
Senate File 143, Second Reading Amendment Number 1, page 16, line 19, after.
Okay, I would move second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 143 and ask for your favorable consideration. Body, this is just a request from the Treasurer's Office. What we're doing on line, or page 16, is deleting the 3 bids from the private organization, which is the TPA, or the third-party administrator. The treasurer wanted to get this stood up, and so it felt that was cumbersome. And then the last part is we're just making it effective immediately.
Any questions? Question being called. We're on second reading amendment number. Yeah, Senator Grew. I'm not doing good today.
Thank you, Mr. President. Question on the amendment. I just make sure I understand. So the treasurer's asking, because it's too cumbersome, not to go through a bid process, so does that mean we just sole source it, or is how we, just a little discussion about how that's working out.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And the making it effectively immediately, I would like a little more discussion on that as well. It seems that with a comprehensive program that really creates a lot of new programs, requires an outsourcing. I guess I wonder what the implications of starting it early is going to be. This seems to be the entirety of the bill. So until there's an operating system, until the rules are in place to operate that system, I wonder what it would statutorily mean to have the legal structure in place without any of the required infrastructure in place to complete the work. So what's the intent of immediate start, and would it make more sense if the intent is just to get the rules and regulations and contracting done quickly, to contemplate a split effective date where certain sections go into effect right away, but the program is not active until after at least July 1st. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. President, and that is exactly why the good treasurer wanted this effective immediately, to get all of the infrastructure up. It's not forcing him to comply immediately with the whole program, but just to get it up and running. As far as the third-party administrators, there's a long list that I gave you yesterday that he will contract for the best services at the best price and compare all of that. They felt like putting it out for an actual bid process and RFP when they can get a contract and evaluate it quickly would be a better use of public funds than to hire a consultant, put it out to bid for several days. And so that is a recommendation from the Treasurer's Office. I would ask for your favorable consideration of this amendment, and if we need to tweak it on third, we certainly can.
Senator Grew.
Oh, sorry.
Question being called. We're on second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 143. All in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Noes have it. Division being called. All in favor, please stand. Those opposed, please stand. The division has failed, 15-15. Senate File, second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 143 has failed. We are back on the bill. Senate File 143 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be heard a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 152, second reading of the Senate File. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
I believe there was an amendment. Were you on 143?
Yes, sir.
All right, we just did that one. All
Yes,
right.
sir. Thank you.
I'm
We're good. Do you want to do it again? The amendment failed. We can run it one more time if you need. Senate File 152, second reading of the Senate File. Just kidding.
Senate File 152, occupational therapist criminal history.
Senate File 152, having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, is so ordered. Senate File 154, second reading of the Senate File.
Senate File 154, Energy Authority Project Financing, Refineries.
There is an amendment. Can we have the amendment read in?
Senate File 154, second reading amendment number 1, page 1, line 11, after.
Thank you. Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 154 and would ask the body to vote aye. Senators, this bill, you'll recall, would allow the Wyoming Energy Authority to also include in the list and items that they support refineries. This is intended to be a conforming amendment to make sure that we had that language, mineral processing and concentration facilities and other relevant parts of this statute. I asked LSO to take a look at it and see where we might have missed some of those spots. And so you'll see the amendment which adds that language. This is intended to be a conforming amendment, and I would ask you to vote aye.
Question being called. We're on second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 154. All in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Amendment is passed. Senator Cooper, we're back on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, or Mr. President. I'd move second reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 154.
You need to have it read in, please.
I'm sorry.
Senate File 154, second reading amendment number 2, page 2, after line 10, delete.
Senator Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd move second amendment number 2 to Senate File 154 and ask your favorable consideration. It's a simple correction in the language to the amendment we added yesterday. Yesterday's amendment referred to within and without the state of Wyoming in regards to pipelines. This clarifies that for this portion of the bill to just within the state of Wyoming. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Question being called. We're on second reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 154. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Second reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 154 has passed the Senate. We're back on the bill. Senate File 154 having been heard 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be heard a third time? Hearing no objection, is so ordered. Senate File 155, second reading of the Senate File.
Senate File 155, Education Teacher Resources.
Senator Scott.
Mr. President, yesterday in Committee of the Whole was asked to furnish some numbers on what was happening, where the money was going. And Mr. President, I went up and consulted with our experts and got more numbers than I can possibly bring to you on second reading. Sorting through them is more than a little difficult. let me report that for administration, if you look combining the central office professional and clerical categories, they're funded at more than the model calls for in 2018-19 by 3.8 million, in 2019-2020 by 4.35 million, in activities in 2019-18. It's 131% more than the model comes from activities, includes the athletics, but also things like debate and that sort of stuff. And the difference was 9.8 million that year, 7.6 million 2021, 123.2%. And with regard to the number of teachers that are funded that are not present, that's varied over the recent years from 500 to, I think the high was about 900. So that, and Mr. Chairman, there's a flood of numbers, and I'm not doing justice to summarizing them. Mr. President, there was also a question about our performance, and the answer basically is that we do better than the national average, which we very well should. We're one of the top states. But let me read from the consultant's report again on the recalibration, page 12. It recites how much better we are. And then it says, moreover, scoring above the US average is not an accomplishment to be touted, because most policymakers and educators across the country view the US average student performance as being inadequate. In international achievement comparisons, such as the PISA, the US average is not number one in any subject or at any grade level, and often is down in the middle of the pack, including countries with much less advanced economies than the US. And frankly, my point of view is that we're leaving way too many kids behind when we've got 45% testing basic and below it, third grade reading, and the consultant is telling us very bluntly, those kids are not going to be able to participate in our modern economy. I think we can aspire to be a good deal better, and it doesn't appear to be a money thing, it appears to be a management issue, Mr. President. So I hope that summary meets the needs, and I think our LSO staff can give the people with questions considerable more statistics. As I say, they gave me more than I could handle at once, Mr. President.
Good explanation. Any further questions? Thank you. So the question is, Senate File 155, having been heard two separate times. The question is, shall the bill be heard a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 167, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 167, Domestic Violence Protection Hearings, Remote Appearance.
Senate File 167, having been heard two separate times, the question is, shall this bill be heard a third time? Hearing no objections, is so ordered. Senate File 169, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 169, State Shooting Complex Task Force.
There is an amendment. Could we have the amendment read in, please?
Senate File 169, second reading amendment number 1, page 6, line 19, delete.
Senator Hicks.
Mr. President, I move second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 196 or 169. This goes into the appropriations and the budget. I talked about this yesterday. We know it's not eligible for ARPA Direct. We've changed those to ARPA permissible funds. Then brings in a provision if there's insufficient ARPA permissible funds or they're determined to not be eligible, then it would be funded with $5 million general fund. on and for the amendment. Stand for any questions.
Question being called. We're voting on second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 169. All in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 169 has passed the Senate. Back on the bill, Senate File 169 having been heard 2 separate times. Question is, shall the bill be heard a third time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. Senate File 173, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 173, financial institutions, similar names.
Senate File 173, having been heard 2 separate times, question is, shall the bill be heard a third time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. Senate File 176, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 176, solid waste disposal districts consolidation.
Senate File 176, having been heard 2 separate times, question is, shall the bill be heard a third time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. Folks, a little bit of explanation. We're going to move into committee of the whole immediately here. Our appropriations committee is going to leave the floor and review the budget amendments that have come in late. And then we will go back into the second reading budget amendments after committee of the whole. Mr. Majority Floor Leader, we're at that order of business, consideration of bills on general file.
So, Mr. President, I move that we Senate resolve itself into the committee of the whole.
I'm not sure who I'm calling out. I don't remember. Senator Ide. All right. We got the new boys, guys. Let's welcome Senator Ide.
I know it. I'm leaving.
The committee of the whole will please come to order. First bill for our consideration is Senate File 80. The reading clerk will read the Senate file. Oh, is it one? Oh, I'm sorry, I took off that. Already messed up here. The reading clerk will read the Senate file 141.
Senate File 141, Transportation Technology Transfer Center Program Funding, sponsored by Senator Pappas, an act relating to county roads, was referred to Committee Number 8, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Boner, Brennan, Furphy, Kolb, and Pappas. Senator Boner, Chairman. Was re-referred to Committee Number 2, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Guru, Kinski, Nethercott, and Salazar. Senator Kinski, Chairman.
Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, do so with a favorable recommendation of Senate File 141. I add Transportation Technology Transfer Center Program. And for explanation of the bill, I refer to the prime sponsor from Laramie County.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Pappas.
Thank you. This bill actually was worked through the interim committee, your transportation interim committee. It was actually killed in committee because of an amendment that kind of poisoned the bill. But most members were in favor of this legislation. And so I thought it was important enough, I brought it back as a private bill. So this University of Wyoming Transportation Technology Transfer Program actually exists right now. The program provides a pavement management system for all our paved roads in the state. what the counties do, they provide, they charge themselves $150,000 when the gas taxes, when the taxes are prior to the distribution to the towns and counties, they are intercepted. $150,000 is intercepted and put into this program. And what happens is that the YDOT will take this money, they hire a contractor to collect data on all the paved roads in the state, and then that data goes to the University of Wyoming, who has decades of experience in analyzing this data, and then that report goes back to the counties, and the counties know where to put their maintenance dollars. So that's existing. This program now provides an extension of that pavement management program into gravel road management program. And if you understand how many roads we have in the state, you'll understand that by far we have more roads in the state that are gravel than we have paved roads. We have nearly 14,700 miles of county road, and only 17% of those are paved. So we got over 12,000 miles of gravel roads that our counties have to deal with maintenance. So what this does is it creates the same program we have for pavement management for gravel management. And what the counties have elected to do is step up. There's 150,000. They're going to dock themselves. They're going to charge themselves another 150,000. Okay, they're already doing 150 a year, so now they'll be doing 300,000. And then they're asking, because the program is there's so many more miles, they're asking for a state match of 300,000. So the counties are putting up 300. Under this bill, the state will pony up 300,000, and we'll do exactly what we're doing for the pavement management program for gravel. And talking to virtually every county commissioner, they see the value in this program. They don't have the expertise and the wherewithal to know where to put their dollars effectively when they're managing roads. And I can tell you, two of our largest industries, the extractive industries and our ag industries, use these roads. And so it's incumbent upon the state to actually help maintain these roads and provide the data so the counties can effectively manage them. Remember, none of this money goes to actual maintenance, but they're taking it out of their distribution to get this data because they understand how important it is. So with that, I'll stand for questions.
Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'm on and for this bill. The poison pill that was put on in the committee was that all the community colleges could bid on this, that the University of Wyoming has been doing for some time for the state. I talked to my community college and they have no interest in bidding on this. They don't have the expertise or the personnel to do this, and they were the only one that could possibly do that. So I agree with the senator from Cheyenne to bring this back and get it done. The counties really need this done so they can take care of the county roads. Thank you.
Are there any more questions? I'll call, Senator Landon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. Just rising in support of the good senator who brought this legislation. Mr. Chairman, this all began a couple of years ago, actually. We went to our management council with the idea that we needed to try to do what we could to provide more help to our counties out there with respect to these thousands and thousands of county road miles. We went to work on that, and we did some good, I think, passed a couple of bills last year. This bill made its way through the interim and all the way into November. And as the sponsor indicated, unfortunately ran into some struggles in that final meeting with an amendment that was placed on the bill which made it untenable. This bill certainly has a line item cost to it. You know, before you balk at the short-term cost, I think the long-term gain on behalf of our counties and our constituents, frankly, a lot of my constituents come to me and want to know why the roads aren't a little bit better out across the state, particularly in the county roads. You go out around the reservoirs, et cetera. Well, this is a way for us to provide our counties with the kind of quality information they need to take care of those gravel roads, over 12,000 miles of them out across there. So it's certainly a bill worth our consideration, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Landon. Senator Hicks, Majority Floor Leader.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just a couple questions. One of them is just the funds flow, that we're taking money and we're going to appropriate the YDOT, and then YDOT gives it to the university to do the study. So why do we need this process? Why wouldn't we just, if we're going to do an appropriation, just do it straight to the university for this purpose? So that's the first question. And then the second question is there's a reason that we have not historically done these for county roads, because they're not state roads, they belong to the counties. And it's not like we don't help the counties, we do. They get part of the federal mineral royalties that are designated under the $200 million cap or designated to county roads. We do local distributions that are unrestricted to be used by the counties. And I'm not sure, but I think there's also some additional funds that come from the gas tax that are distributed back to the counties. And I'll get that information, Mr. Chairman, about all the other funds that we funnel to the counties, specifically for the purposes of roads for the Second Amendment. So two issues there: why the circuitous route to get the money to the people that are actually going to do the study, and just was there any discussion in the committee about all the other sources of funding that we provide to the counties, and some specifically for roads?
Thank you. Senator Hutchings.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Neither on or for the bill, just a question. I believe I heard the bringer of the bill mention that this is a study and that we're actually not going to get any money to help with the roads. So I'm just kind of confused or conflicted. If this is going to help the roads, why isn't it going to actually help the roads? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The issue is why we're giving the money to YDOT. Again, the program is already existing. We're doing this for the pavement management program. The actual reason is that the data collection is done under a contract with YDOT. So University of Wyoming does not collect the data for this program. And so YDOT has the ability and the expertise to manage contracts with the types of contractors that do road and studies and things like that. And so the contract for the data collection is done through YDOT, and so that, I believe, is why the existing pavement management program is funded through YDOT. I suppose there could be a change in that. I have not, that question never came up as far as why it's going through YDOT, because it historically has. But if there's a change, I would have to see what the pros and cons would be on that before I could support something like that. But we have the system already, and so it just seemed like all we were doing is just expanding the existing program. Forgot what the Senator Hicks' second question was, but to Senator Hutchins, the road is there is no dollars, as I mentioned, for actual maintenance. But the data for where the roads need to be repaired and what kind of repair needs to be made and the extent of the repair, all of that is something that counties cannot do. They don't have the wherewithal to do that. And under the College of Engineering at the University of Wyoming in our transportation section, they've been doing that for years. They understand how to do it. They have software that they've developed that can create that, and they can tell the counties where to put their dollars and how much of a fix, rather than a rebuild. Maybe it's I don't know all the different parts and pieces to gravel road maintenance, but the specific data is so important to them that they're willing to put up another $150,000 out of their very precious funds to do that. And back to Senator Hicks. Yes, I believe that the state has skin in the game here. Yeah, the counties, they are county roads, but and YDOT typically, they don't deal with these roads, and they're glad to manage the program because they understand that, it's part of Wyoming, and even though it's not their roads, they're glad to manage the program. They certainly don't want to foot the extra $150,000 or the other $300,000 because we believe that the state has a vested interest here in making sure that ag and our oil and gas folks and our mining folks have roads that they can use, and that the counties can keep these very important pillars of our economy running. So that's my 2 cents worth, and I'm sticking by it.
Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just to go directly to the majority floor leader's question, I would take you to 2117-115, which is the University Technology Transfer Center program. It reads as follows in part: the funding of the program shall be administered by the Wyoming Department of Transportation. The cost of the program shall be provided by each of the following contributing a minimum of $25,000, et cetera, or up to $31,250, provided the federal government, other non-state sources contribute an equal amount. So the funds come from the Wyoming Department of Transportation, the counties, the feds, the cities and towns, and the university itself. One of the benefits of this program, Mr. Chairman, is the fact that when that information is gathered up, the Department of Transportation does work with our counties on items like bridges and with overlay. Often, what this will do, if we get this all in one system, it will not only benefit the counties with that expertise on the evaluation of those roads, but that interconnectedness with the Department of Transportation. I think the committee found that to be of great benefit, and we really commend the bill for that reason. We think there's a lot of benefits from this. A lot of different funds can go into this, and that's why it's under the Department of Transportation. That allows them to utilize all sorts of funding sources. So thank you.
Senator Landon. Anyone else? Are you ready for the question? All those in favor of Senator Boner's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, that it do so with a favorable recommendation of Senate File 141, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The chair thinks it was the ayes that won that one. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Oh, you guys are going to put the pressure on me here now. Let's see. Pardon me? Okay. All those in favor, please stand. Thank you. You can please sit. All the noes, please rise. Senate File 141 has passed. 17 ayes, 8 noes.
Wrong nose.
Senator Hicks. Okay, we'll move on to the next bill. The next bill is Senate File 80. There is an amendment. The reading clerk will read the amendment.
Senate File 80, Visitation Rights, sponsored by Senator McEwen, an act relating to public health and safety, was referred to Committee Number 10, which turned a committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Baldwin, Barlow, Bouchard, Dockstader, and Hutchings. Senator Baldwin, Chairman.
Discussion on the amendment. Seeing none? Oop. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's see. Senate File, let's see where I go here. So the amendment to Senate File 80, First Amendment. Oh, okay. Let's see here. Are you ready for the question? So. Okay. Will the reading clerk read the amendment to number 1 in Senate File 80?
Senate File 80, Committee of the Whole Amendment to Number 1, page 2, line 14, after.
Senator Baldwin.
Mr. Chairman, I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, excuse me, that it do so with a favorable recommendation on Senate File 80, Visitation Rights. There is an amendment, and I think it was already read in. So I would turn for the explanation of the bill and the amendment to the gentleman who traveled a long, tenuous, dangerous mission to get here, Senator McEwen.
Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a good little bill, and it's quite simple and it's quite short. Basically, what it does is it requires healthcare facilities such as 24-hour daycare, hospice, hospital, intermediate care facilities, nursing, etc. Basically anywhere where they're doing medical care on a long-term basis. It also includes a assisted living facility. And as we go to the next page, basically what it does is it does require those agencies to provide visiting hours. However, it allows them to set the standards, safety equipment, number of visitors, visiting hours. So basically everybody's going to work together on this, and believe it or not, CMS even likes it. The amendment basically goes into a little bit further language. This will not apply to people who are detained involuntarily or charged with a crime and in custody. The amendment has language that talks about people with violent past and violent charges. They don't necessarily have to be allowed either. And that's pretty much the bill, and with that, I'll stand for questions. Thank you.
Senator Pappas.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just would like a little bit more explanation from the bringer of the bill. Why, I guess, we're bringing the bill? Has there been a problem? I guess I'm not aware of that, and there may be instances out there. If you could explain to me, what kind of problem we're looking to remedy with this bill? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The problem why we're bringing this bill was what happened during COVID. And as we've talked, now they're talking about the next outbreak of Ebola. Might as well be the Black Plague. If we don't put something into place, we're going to go through the same thing we went through last time. Biggest reason I'm pretty passionate about this bill is I think we all knew Representative Roy Edwards, didn't we? Or some of us did. He went home one night and collapsed. By the time his wife got him to the hospital, he had COVID. And the way they handled that was they took him down to Casper, and then they quarantined his wife to the house, and they wouldn't let the kids in. And that's just one of numerous cases why we're pushing the envelope on this. It's easy not to allow visitation. It's easy to take the easy way out. This bill is going to require them to look at protective equipment and have a plan so that what happened to Roy Edwards, he ended up dying alone, and they wouldn't let his parent or his kids in. They wouldn't let his wife come down. And that's just a horrible thing to happen. So that's why I'm bringing the bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. President Driscoll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mine's more comments a little bit. I support the bill, but more than anything, thank you, Senator McEwen, for all the work you did to work with all the agencies and the people. This was a controversial bill last year, folks. This is how it gets done. He actually went and worked with everybody and found a solution that works with everybody. I thank you for doing that. Good work.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Honor for the bill. I think this is thoughtfully done to try and provide balance. There's no question there was a lot of concern about visitation. And I appreciate the work that was, again, done to work with all organizations to ensure that there was appropriate precautions in place and that there was allowance for protective measures and everything else to ensure that everyone was as safe as they could be while, again, ensuring these visitation rights. So support the bill. Encourage all of you to as well.
Seeing nothing more. Question's been called. Yeah. Okay. All those in favor? Oh. Okay. Senator Baldwin.
I'd like to move the Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 to Senate File 80, please.
All those in favor of Senator Baldwin's motion to, oh, is there any discussion? Excuse me. Question's been heard. All those in favor of Senator Baldwin's motion to adopt Standing Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 to Senate File 80, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Motion passes. Back to the bill. Questions then heard. All those in favor of Senator Baldwin's motion that the Committee of the Whole rise to report that it do so with favorable recommendation of Senate File 80, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Motion passes. Let's see here. We'll move on to the next bill here, Senate File 174. There's amendments.
Senate File 174, Wyoming Charter School Authorizing Board, sponsored by Senator Driscoll, an act relating to charter schools, was referred to Committee Number 4, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes Senators Beitman, Brennan, Scott, and Steinmetz. No Senator Rothfuss. Senator Steinmetz, acting chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What's your pleasure? Senator, pardon me. Okay. Thank you, Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, apologize. Senate File 174. Mr. Chairman, I move in the Committee of the Whole Reisman report. You do so with a recommendation that Senate File 174 do pass. I believe the Standing Committee amendment.
Yes.
I ask that be read in at this time.
Senate File 174, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1, page 1, line 8, delete.
Discussion on the amendment.
Mr. Chairman, I move the Standing Committee amendment, and I yield to Senator Ellis for an explanation of both the bill and the Standing Committee amendment.
Thank you. Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Colleagues, as we walk through this bill, I want to, the Standing Committee amendment has a lot of minor tweaks, some other substantive changes, and so as we work through the discussion of the bill, I will also explain what the Standing Committee does as we go through it page by page. But before we begin our discussion of what the bill does, I just want to provide just some reminders. Charter schools are public schools, for those of you who have that concern. And if you look at the charter school statutes, they were established in 21-3-301 in 2001. So for about 20 years, we've had charter school laws on the books, but there were relatively few in the state. There was one in Laramie County, a few in Albany County. And so as we looked at what was going on in other states, we started discovering that other states recognize that sometimes there's a conflict of interest with school districts who maybe have a reluctance in sharing ADM, a reluctance in establishing charter schools. This was played out in other states, and one way that they used to address this concern was establishing a separate authorizer instead of just relying on local school boards to set these up. So a few years ago, the legislature created a separate authorizer, and this has been in line with what a lot of other states have adopted. I believe more than 40 or so states take this approach. At the time, we had a compromise. We thought, well, if we're only going to, how about we only have 3 new charter schools come online with this separate authorizer? Because we only have the 3, we didn't want to set up a full-time charter authorizer. Instead, we tapped the SLIB, the State Lands and Investments Board, which is comprised of 5 elected officials in our state. And so we passed that law, and much to our surprise, and not surprise, but our delight, there were 3 applicants, perhaps even more, and so it really demonstrated an eagerness for people to apply for charter school authorization with a separate authorizer. So in building on that work, that's what this bill seeks to do, is to get rid of kind of that pilot program, having the SLIB as the authorizer, and establish a whole new charter school authorizing board and remove the cap of 3. So on page 1, the bill, this is all conforming amendments. On line 8, you'll see some things that we discuss as we go. This would remove some authorizing full-time positions, but we'll talk about that later on. On page 2, section 5, or pages 2 through 5, section 1, this covers new ground, new statute that we're writing, and this would create the Wyoming Charter School Authorizing Board. It would be composed of 5 members, 1 appointed by the superintendent, 1 by the president of the Senate, 1 by the speaker, and 2 by the governor. It requires that these individuals be residents of the state and have relevant experience and a demonstrated commitment to advancing charter schools. On the bottom of page 3, paragraph D, you'll see a conflict of interest provision, which would apply to these board members. And then on page 4, you'll see standard language about initial appointments, staggered terms, removal of members, how to fill vacancies, etc. On the bottom of page 4, the standing committee amendment would remove paragraph H, which deals with the immunity of board members. The committee recommended removing this paragraph because it's already covered in the Wyoming Government Immunity Act found in Wyoming Statute 1-39-104. Page 5, you'll see that board members shall at least meet twice a year, and then there's just standard language about how board members receive per diem while performing their duties. And then you also see 2 conforming amendments to re-letter the paragraphs if we remove paragraph H. The second half of page 5 is where you see section 2, and this is where we amend existing statute. On page 6, line 2, you'll see a conforming amendment if we adopt the standing committee amendment. Page 6, lines 5 through 15 imposes new duties on the state superintendent. Here, she would oversee an employee who would be a liaison to the charter school and act as a local education agency, or LEA, for charter schools. You'll see a conforming amendment on line 14 about the ability to apply for grants. Here, the standing committee amendment would make sure that that would be changed to grants plural instead of a singular grant. And it would clarify on line 15 that the State Department would act as an LEA for grants in which those grants require an LEA. Page 7 amends and adds new definitions. You'll see a definition for the word for authorizer. We would delete the SLIB as the statewide authorizer and replace it with this new board. And then you'll see the addition of two new definitions for full-time charter school and governing board. On the bottom of page 7 through 9, this amends the powers and duties of the authorizers, specifically on what the authorizer must consider when looking at these applications. They are to base their renewal, non-renewal, and revocation decisions on evidence collected through the process. You'll see a standing committee amendment which would clarify that these decisions should also include information collected from interviews and presentations presented by the charter applicant to the authorizer. Paragraph Romanet number 4 on line 6 is a conflict of interest provision. The standing committee amendment would bolster this by requiring that any charter school board member has to disclose and abstain from voting when they have or may have a conflict. This also has additional language which would require the applicant to demonstrate accountability and transparency. It would discuss their ability to negotiate and execute contracts and doing that all in good faith, require them to establish policies and standards for charters to include things like requirements for organizational capacity and infrastructure, soliciting and reviewing charter applications, providing ongoing oversight and evaluation, and overall provisions for the approval, renewal, and revocation of charter schools. On that point, on whether to approve, you'll see on page 9, lines 10 through 18, this would require the authorizer to grant applicants that possess competence in the elements required by the application to be based on evidence. And you'll see a small standing committee amendment changing the word all to the, so that these decisions are based on evidence collected through the charter school application review process. On the bottom of page 9 onto page 10, this will amend current statute. Currently, funding for authorizers consists of no more than a 3% fee, so you'll see that existing language there. This 3% fee is collected from the charter's annual state funding. This paragraph is important to flag, and we will discuss it later again in the bill. But here, the bill would restrict these funds to be used only for the purposes of fulfilling duties under this article, and it would require that charters and the state superintendent to publish a report on how these funds were expended. Again, this is an effort to bolster transparency. On page 10, line 7, paragraph D, this also makes clear that if a charter's performance or legal compliance are unsatisfactory, the authorizer has a duty to notify the charter of the problem, afford them a reasonable time to cure the defect unless the problem warrants revocation. The timeframes, types of problems, et cetera, can be more fully addressed through rule promulgation or in the requirements of the charters or their contracts. The rest of page 10 is a conforming amendment. Page 11, paragraph C, talks about charter schools not being allowed to discriminate against students. There is concern that charters only cherry pick the best and brightest of students. In other states, there are charters, however, that specialize in educating students who are at risk or who have special needs. And thus there are laws that allow for those students who are at risk or have special needs to receive a preference to be admitted to those charters. This paragraph would do away with any kind of preference language. Currently, we don't have any charters specializing in at-risk or special education students, and so this is something we can revisit in the future if necessary. On the bottom of page 11, line 21, you'll see a clarifying amendment carrying over to the content of paragraph G on page 12. Paragraph G, this is an important part of the bill. Charter schools would be exempt from certain requirements that exist for traditional K through 12 brick and mortar schools. One example would be the requirement that teachers be certified by the PTSB or the Professional Teaching Standards Board. Some of the other senators and I have toured charter schools in other states. One of those that we visited had a high school that didn't hire any certified teachers, but had nationally recognized scientists, for example, teaching their science courses. So that's the intent of that paragraph. There's a small amendment on line 21, deleting the word such and replacing it to the word the. We don't like using the word such in our drafting. Going on to page 13, you'll see requirements on charters that can't be waived. There's existing language that requires charters to comply with assessment standards. The Standing Committee amendment you'll see there would also clarify that charters would not be exempt from laws pertaining to the health, life, and safety of students and the administration of our school finance reform. At this point, let me just pause for a second and say that my colleague from Laramie County and I had done a red line version. She emailed this to you, so to aid you in walking through this bill, you could see, if you look for an email from Senator Brennan, you would see a red line version of this to help you track it better. My apologies for not mentioning that sooner. On the bottom of page 13, paragraph H, you'll see a conforming and clarifying amendment about the powers of charter schools. On page 14, paragraph J, this covers contracting authority. On line 8, you'll see existing language stating that any services for which a charter contracts with a school district shall be provided by a district at an incremental cost. To that sentence, you'll see language with the Standing Committee amendment that those contracts may be negotiated as an agreement separate from a charter contract between the charter school and authorizer. And the purpose of this language is to provide some protection to charters to ensure that authorizers aren't using any and all contracts as a mechanism to revoke a charter. And you'll see similar language inserted on page 15. Page 15, paragraph G on line 9, requires each governing board of a charter school to adopt a conflict of interest policy. Similar to paragraph R, this would prohibit those who are compensated by an education service provider from serving as a voting member on the governing board of any charter. Going on to page 16, there's a new paragraph 8S, which would authorize a charter board to have access to education service provider records as necessary to oversee the education service provider contracts. Page 16 deals with contracts themselves as set forth in 21-3-305. On paragraph A, beginning on line 9, a charter school applicant serves as the basis for a contract between a charter school and an authorizer. This would add language to say that there will be 75 days for the authorizer to enter into a contract with a charter. Again, we don't want delay to be used as a tactic to prevent charter schools from opening, and that these contracts shall establish academic and operational performance expectations for which the charter will be evaluated. The following paragraphs include amendments on what the charter school contracts must contain, and that these contracts are the final authorizing document for charter schools. On page 17, lines 7 through 8, this would change the current review of the authorizer of charter school performance to be from a period of every 5 years to be once a year. So there's some trade-offs in this, Mr. Chairman. The charter schools would be allowed to waive certain requirements, but this extra language is to provide some assurance that, that these charters won't be left unchecked. On page 17 through 18, this would include new language intended to alleviate those concerns about how the authorizer will provide oversight and support these charters, which may include additional rigorous and reliable indicators and any other agreed-upon terms, including certain pre-opening conditions, and that these agreements must be signed by the chair and the authorizer before they take effect. Finally, on page 18, paragraph, I guess it's Romanet 20, this would require that these agreements be promptly submitted to the state superintendent. On the bottom of page 18, this would remove the current appeal process. Right now, we had some language in there about how that would work with the authorizer, with the SLIB having some review. This would remove some of that language, and we will discuss appeals later on in the bill. On page 19, line 6, this would insert a new paragraph H, which would require the authorizer and charter school to develop a closure protocol. Committee members that have listened to a lot of debate about charter schools have asked, what if they're not performing? And if you visit other states, they say charters close. If they don't have the support of parents and students, that's a natural check on making sure that they're doing the job that they're set out to do. Recognizing that, this would require charters to develop those protocols. And so a lot of these details, however, can be fleshed out through the rulemaking. Following that, you'll see paragraph J, which migrates those charters who were approved by the SLIB to the new statewide authorizer. Page 20 through 21 amends current statutes dealing with converted charter schools. There's an existing definition that provides that a converted charter school means one that is converted from an existing public school operating within a district. This is largely conforming amendments. There are protections here, though, for students with special needs in paragraph E. Provides that the charters have the ability to hire their own employees in paragraph F. And then on page 21, a new paragraph G, which would give enrollment preference to those students who had attended a converted charter school for the prior year. On page 21, paragraph A, in existing statute, you'll see what the contents of the charter school application must contain. So first, in paragraph 1, or excuse me, number 1, which you don't see in the bill but is in our green books, this requires an applicant to provide a description of the educational program of the school designed to identify those students who the school is attempting to educate and identify these objectives. So then you'll see this paragraph 2 in your bill, Romanet 2, which would clarify that these types of pupil outcomes, which may be identified in the charter application, would also include those students with special needs. Again, trying to address that concern that charters are only going to cherry pick certain students. Going on to page 22, you'll see that pupil outcomes also include state assessments and standards. Page 22, line 5, the applicant would also require schools to develop a plan using internal and external assessments. And then going into paragraph Romanet 4 on line 9, that the applicants must have bylaws and organizational charts as well as descriptions about staff roles and responsibilities to ensure parental, teacher, and community involvement. This is a big bill. We're almost there, senators. You'll also see some additional language throughout the rest of the page. These are to make clear that charters will have described hiring qualifications for all their employees, and that expectations explained in the student handbook would also be included in the charter application. On page 23, line 2, paragraph Romanet 19, you'll see a change here with the standing committee amendment. This paragraph would now read, a proposed agreement or summary of a proposed agreement between the charter school governing board and the authorizer, and if applicable, the district, regarding the respective legal liability and applicable insurance coverage. We amended this language, and it's important because charters might have a proposed agreement that hasn't yet been finalized. We don't want to tie anyone's hands. We're trying to give them the flexibility if there's a proposed agreement to be looked at that hasn't quite been finalized. On page 23, lines 15 through 16, you'll see a conforming amendment. Page 23, lines 18 through 23, there would be a new paragraph inserted for identifying and successfully serving students with special needs, students who are English language learners, students who are academically behind, and gifted students. And then on page 24, lines 2 through 3, a paragraph requiring that the application include a detailed startup plan. The remainder of the amendments on page 24, lines 5 through 11, are conforming amendments that change reference to the SLIB and the Wyoming Charter Authorizing Board. Starting on page 24, you'll see the existing provisions concerning the length of operation under charters, as well as provisions related to renewal and revocation. Here, beginning on the bottom of page 24, line 21, you'll see the sentence, an authorizer may grant of the charter contract with specific conditions necessary for improvements to the charter school. But it would add a limitation on the top of page 25, saying that those conditions cannot include enrollment caps or conditions that are contrary to the provisions in this article or unduly infringe on their charter's autonomy and authority. Mr. Chairman, unfortunately, we've seen in other states a lot of games that get played to try and prevent charters from being authorized or from opening. And so there are a lot of what-ifs that have been contemplated in this bill, so hopefully we're addressing those, but certainly that's why the length of the bill, Mr. Chairman. Page 25, lines 6 through 9, paragraph G, you'll see a paragraph stating that if a charter is revoked or not renewed, that the charter, as recommended with the standing committee amendment, would be could take their appeal to a district court where the charter is located. The amendment would remove the requirement that the appeal be made to the state superintendent. Since the superintendent is involved in appointing board members and has a role as an authorizer, we didn't think it made sense having her involved in the appeal. Starting in the middle of page 25, going on to page 6, these sections have to do with education finance. Page 26, lines 7 through 11, have a new paragraph that would provide 100% ADM, or average daily membership, funding for transportation, which is found in 2113-320, and special education, which is 2113-321. That's how we treat existing brick and mortar K through 12 schools, so that would be reflected in this amendment as well. You'll see again on page 27, lines 4 through 8, that same requirement would exist for full-time virtual charter schools. But going back to page 26, paragraph F, you'll see a conforming amendment on lines 14 through 15, removing reference to the SLIB. On line 20, you'll also see the insertion of a paragraph to say that full-time virtual charter schools authorized by the new authorizing board will also be entitled to 100% of the benefit afforded under the school foundation program based on ADM less other specified amounts. Page 27, lines 4 through 8, we've already covered. Lines 10 through 13 would be deleted by the standing committee amendment. This language would have authorized the education department to retain 5% funding from a school district for charters. The department testified that the 3% fee that we discussed on page 9, beginning on line 20, would cover the administrative costs for the new authorizing board. So you'll see this language removed with the standing committee amendment. Section 3 contains the repealers. I've emailed a copy of those out to you, but they essentially deal with references to the SLIB, ADM, preferences and enrollment that would no longer be applicable if Senate File 174 were to pass. Section 4 would have authorized 2 new full-time positions for the department. The Senate Education Committee removed Section 4 in the Standing Committee amendment. I believe the thinking is that these positions could be better addressed in the budget. And then finally, Section 5 would be renumbered as Section 4 with the Standing Committee amendment, and the effective date for this act would be July 1st, 2023. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Senator Ellis. Are there any questions? Questions been heard? Question? Yep. Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So there's a lot of information here. If anybody followed the charter school discussion the last couple of years, you know this is a very complex issue. I have a couple of just technical things I want to understand better. One is the appointments to the board. I don't know of anywhere else in statute where a presiding officer from each body makes an appointment to a board that has statutory authority. I don't know of another one in statute. Second thing that I'd say is that same officer has the ability to remove that person, but with no sideboards. If you look at the chief executive of the state of Wyoming, there are sideboards when they appoint someone and they remove someone. The second thing I would offer in that, just as an observation, is this body has confirmation powers over many of the appointees that the chief executive does. And I'm interested to know if that was contemplated. It's not in the bill, but I'm interested to know if that was contemplated as well. And there's some other things, and I want to be clear that I think there was a comment about what occurs on page 27 regarding the funding. Looks to me like 100% of the funding goes to the school. I just want to clarify this because you have to go look at a couple more statutes to actually get to that bottom answer. And then an additional percentage goes to the State Department of Education for, I would guess, being that 49th school district. Because to me, ladies and gentlemen, that's what we're actually establishing in here, because in the very first part of the bill, it says the Department of Education will be the education entity for these charter schools. So I'd like to know who currently is that entity for charter schools. Is it the local districts, or is it the state through the current board? And then I want a clarification on the funding flow that is contained on page 27. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Barr. President Driscoll.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to attempt to answer that. Part of it's going to be complicated. We had an amendment that was ready that did not come. That'll come on second. That authorizing board will be changed. And I'll tell you the makeup tomorrow. It's final, will be finalized, but it will not be coming out of the two bodies. We realize the hole in that. This bill and the amendments have been worked extensively by the office downstairs and the superintendent's office. So I'm going to tell you, these amendments and what has been done have not been done in the dark. They've been done with lots of hours of collaboration, like I said, with the office downstairs, superintendent's office, and others. For those of you in here, most of y'all know it, charter schools, as was said, have been around since 2001. They just didn't happen. We formed charter schools last year. They said, well, whatever. We had a rush of people that wanted to do it. We have 3 new ones in the works. This is what we said. We knew we'd missed some things last year when we did it. We knew it's really hard to start from the ground up. This really pulls it all back together. It fulfills a dream of majority of the parents around the state that want school choice. Charter schools are overwhelmingly supported statewide, and this is We've looked nationwide for the best of the best. We've put it together. Wyoming's well on its way. We're going to have 3 new charter schools, folks, coming online. We're going to continue to do what education does best, which is to look internally and continue to improve and make it better, and we're going to do that. This amendment is coming, like I said, will change the authorizing board. It will no longer look that way. The funding, yes. Charter school bill last year was funded at 80%. We made a mistake. What we didn't realize, and this is me, it was my bill. We funded it at 80%, but what I didn't get, and I think some other members on the floor, their educators will, part of the funding for schools comes out of your local funding, part of it comes out of state funding. We really can't do it with this 80% that way, so we moved it back up, because what we had effectively done was underfunded them because it was down at 60. The other part that I will tell you without a doubt, if you think charter schools are saving a huge amount of money, it's not. This is about education choice. We're not trying to save gazillions of dollars. It's about to give parents choice for schools. So I encourage you to look at it. There'll be a budget amendment that comes. I don't know what our rules are exactly about talking about what's there, but there will be 2 positions that come in out of Department of Ed to come in to actually make this thing work. So we are going to actually expand. One position will be moved internally, and one come. You'll hear that in the budget amendments. This is the bill that pulls everything together and makes it work even more efficiently. And so I encourage you to pass this on. We're happy to answer questions, new comments, but it really is fulfilling a dream of a vast majority of the parents around the state that want to look at school choice. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Driscoll. Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, in answer to one of the other questions, the provision in there where the State Department acts as the local education authority, that is not a big time-consuming job. That's something, it's a federal requirement to get certain grants. You have to have somebody that takes that role. My understanding is it's essentially a ministerial type of function, assisting the actual charter schools itself, and that's where the effort in that one comes in, not at the State Department level. And that one, frankly, that issue was missed in last year's bill. We've got a technical correction bill that solves this problem too. We may have to harmonize those, but that's not a big deal. Where the extra work does come in is in working the applications, getting them approved, and then the required monitoring. And Mr. Chairman, I think there is going to be some issue as to how quickly that's needed. I'm not convinced that it can't wait till funding in the regular budget next year. So that's why you don't see an appropriation here. Mr. Chairman, while I'm on my feet, let me say that I'm a very strong supporter of this bill because I think competition is what makes our society go round. I think we need the competition. This is competition within the school district without any of the constitutional arguments you might hear and some other ways of doing it. And I think it will be effective in improving and motivating our local districts to improve the quality of the education. So I think this is not to give parents a choice, but I think it will improve the quality of education for everybody else as well, Mr. Chairman. So on and for the bill.
Thank you, Senator Scott. Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple questions. I like the fact that the charter schools are going to have a school authorizing board now. I think that's a good move in the right direction. The question I have is, I think on page 12, and maybe it's just this new terminology that just doesn't quite set right for me, because basically it just says a charter school shall be part of the state's system of public education. Obviously, if they're getting public money, they will. But it says a charter school shall not be subject to the state's education statutes or any state or local rule, regulation, policy, or procedure relating to public schools within an applicable school district, regardless of whether such rule, regulation, policy, or procedure is established by the school board, the State Board of Education, the State Department of Education, or the State Superintendent of Public Instruction. So I would just maybe like a little clarification on that, if we really are a public school, even though it's a charter school, and I understand that. And I do believe in competition. I do believe that charter schools are not a bad thing. They're probably really a good thing, and I think there is a place for certain kids in certain schools, whether it be charter schools, whether it be online schools, whatever it be. I think this is a good thing. I'm just wondering about that particular new language on page 12.
Thank you, Senator Schuler. Senator Rothfuss. I'm sorry. Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know that I walked through the bill with the standing committee amendment. If you just look at your standing committee amendment, you'll see some cleanup language, some renumbering. You know, there is some bolstered language about avoiding conflicts, instead of just avoiding conflict of interest for board members to disclose and not vote on members if they're on the charter board. Just if we could maybe stick to the amendment the best we can, and if there are no specific questions on the amendment, I'd call for the question, and that way we can get back on the bill.
Question's been called. All those in favor of Senator Scott's motion to adopt standing committee amendment number 1 to Senate File 174 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Amendment passes. Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the bill, I was a no in committee, and I think it's important to really think this through. We've been working on this for a couple of years now, and the concern I have is really sort of the process and the input that we're receiving and how this is being done. I think folks have assumed from my testimony and many others that I'm against charter schools because I've opposed this legislation, which I'm on and against, and last year, that legislation. I have 2 exceptional charter schools. I love our charter schools. We have the Laramie Montessori Charter School. We have the Snowy Range Academy Charter School in Laramie. These are incredible schools, and they're a great opportunity, and they are there effectively for a choice, a diversity of ideas within the public school system that provides different opportunities for different students that perhaps have different learning styles or approaches. This is a good thing. This is a good system. So I just want to start off by making it very clear that my concerns about this bill and what we're moving forward with has nothing to do with a concern, Mr. Chairman, about charter schools in concept. I'll also note that over the time that I've served on the Education Committee, which is 12 years now, we spent a lot of time on charter schools and trying to come up with systems and ways to improve them, recognizing that while some districts such as mine have been open to charter schools, other school districts have been closed effectively and have shut things down. And that's the impetus for the bill last year, was a recognition that some school districts were just putting the stiff arm out there and saying, no, there will be no charter schools. And I understand, Mr. Chairman, that that's a desire for an alternative system. And we did look into that on the Education Committee and didn't end up passing legislation, but the legislation that we discussed as being the best system for the state of Wyoming was a 49th school district, which would act as the local education authority and would be the administrative unit that would have an objective board of education that would provide support, but also work with the local school district and contemplate how that charter school interacts with the funding model and consider, Mr. Chairman, whether it's appropriate for that school district and how to work with school districts in a collaborative endeavor to do what's best for those districts. Because we understand, Mr. Chairman, that some of our school districts like mine are large enough that you can work through the addition of a charter school without significantly affecting the funding model and the funding formula for that school district. Ours still changed unquestionably by adding 2 additional schools. There's a cost associated with that, but relative to the total cost of the school district, it ended up being something that our school district was willing to work through. And there were still tremendous challenges to get through that. We know, for example, that Sheridan 3, that's a district that has 90 students enrolled right now, if I'm not mistaken. That was the October ADM, I believe, in Sheridan 3, 90 students. Add another school to that district, and you effectively double the cost to the state for that district. They're already around $30,000 per ADM in that district. Add another school, and you'll increase that 30,000 probably to 40,000-ish in ADM, which is just mathematically and financially unreasonable. We need to be able to have consideration and oversight when we contemplate these decisions. Now, what ended up happening as we looked at it last year is there was so much interest from the school choice community that the enthusiasm and the enthusiastic supporters of charter school and choice just took the ball and ran with it and left behind the school foundation program, the funding model, the local school districts. Remember, you each represent some number, as I do, of school districts. There are 48 of them, and they're very concerned about this legislation. So while many parents and many people in the state support school choice and support charter schools, every single school district and local board of trustees is very concerned about bills like this because we don't even have a fiscal note. We don't have a fiscal note on this bill. I'm going to say that one more time. There isn't a fiscal note on this bill. Not only isn't there an estimate of the cost, which there wasn't last year, it turned out once we worked through the numbers to be a $13 million bill for 3 charter schools. $13 million for 3 charter schools, 13.6 if you want some decimals. That's what the budget note would have been had we seen it last year, which we didn't when we voted on the previous bill. This one started off at 80% funding, which I argued, Mr. Chairman, last year was unconstitutional. I still believe it was unconstitutional, and that we have to go to 100% because whether I like the process or not, all of our kids need equity. It's constitutional. So every student needs to have appropriate funding. 100% is right. The challenge is one of the things that sold the bill last year was that it cost less because we only had 80% of the funding. Now in this bill, a bill that doesn't have a footnote, or excuse me, a budget note, we don't know what the fiscal is going to be on it. We shift from 80 to 100% as part of that. For the existing 3 schools, my back of the envelope calculation says at least $3 million a year. I don't know. We'll see. And then how many new schools will there be that we have to go from 80% to 100% on, recognizing it'll go through the funding model. We haven't done the analysis of what it looks like if you add 10 new schools. It's a big question mark. So, Mr. Chairman, when we contemplate a decision of this magnitude, and this is important, and again, the objective of putting together a better system for charter schools is one I support, I embrace, and I think we should have done this through an interim process over the past 2 years, working with all stakeholders and taking all the voices seriously, not just the voices of the people that really want a new charter school in their district or voices from a corporation in Michigan. We need to hear everyone, we need to weigh it all, and we need to build a system that works for the state of Wyoming and recognizes all of these interests equally. So one of the other concerns I have, and part of the motivation, Mr. Chairman, for why bills like this are coming forward, is that we need to finally get rid of all of the strings that we've attached to public schools. Right? Public schools are too onerous, too much testing, too much reporting, too many requirements, too much standardization, too much licensing. We've heaped on so many things that we need to cut that loose, and we can only do that through a charter school. On the point of order, Mr. Chairman, and I didn't hear it.
Stay on the bill, please. You were talking about other schools.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, I'm developing the contrast between the public education system, which is our existing set of schools, and charter schools, and the motivation for a piece of legislation that explicitly, through the language of this particular bill, removes any statutory obligations from charter schools to provide them equivalency with the public schools. If the good president would like, I can point to the specific provisions in this legislation that do that, if you'd prefer, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So page 12, paragraph G, talks about pursuant to the terms of the contract and except as otherwise provided in this article, a charter school shall be part of the state's public school system, except as provided in this article, a charter school shall not be subject to the state's education statutes or any state or local rule, regulation, policy, or procedure relating to public schools within an applicable school district, regardless of whether such rule, regulation, policy, or procedure is established by the school board, the State Board of Education, the State Department of Education, or the State Superintendent of Public Instruction. Mr. Chairman, that's what I was referring to. And so I'll continue on that. We provide that provision for charter schools because apparently we think that the collective rules and regulations that this body has passed to govern our public schools are a bad lot. And if that's the case, Mr. Chairman, rather than creating a system that gets to be exempted from the bad decisions that this body makes, I guess I would suggest that we just stop making bad decisions and passing all of the other legislation that we've put through this process over the last 2 weeks and the last few years that lead to the unnecessary regulation of our public schools and provides the incentive for our schools to want to be effectively charter schools. And then the final point, Mr. Chairman, of concern is if we're going to do this for charter schools and exempt them from all of the bad rules and onerous regulations and requirements that they teach X and not teach Y, maybe it's just in our public schools' interest to file for charter status and get themselves the heck out from under us so that they can get back to educating students without having to focus on testing 24/7, Mr. Chairman. And the final point I would make is we can do this right. This is an incredibly valuable thing. We can do this right. But it would not be by just accepting the interests of corporations that profit from charter schools around the country, but getting back to how we used to do things, which is assembling an interim study, bringing together all of the stakeholders and experts, and figuring out how to put together a charter school authorizing entity that has in its best interests the children of the state of Wyoming, not just a select few, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Rothfuss. Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, and not desiring to filibuster things so that we run too late on the budget, let me just briefly respond to the issue of the exemption in here. That is a very limited exemption in spite of the way it gets written in the drafting process. There is an explicit provision, you can see it, page 11, line 4, covering making them not exempt to the various civil rights laws and that sort of thing. There is further that's in the existing statute that's not in this bill, a series of things that they are subject to. Again, civil rights, health and safety requirements, applicable to other schools are subject to this. Student accessibility and accountability requirements, they're subject to that. The Public Records Act, they're subject to that. So they're still subject to quite a number of their laws, but they are exempt from a number of the others. And that's the process we're trying to, and frankly, we're experimenting a bit as to which laws really make a difference and which don't. And I think it's an experiment well worth having, may lead to us to simplify some of those other laws eventually. But, Mr. Chairman, I wanted to make clear that it wasn't a total exemption, in spite of the way the language is written.
Thank you, Senator Scott. President Driscoll.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Between you and lunch, I'm going to try to keep this reasonably short. We can turn the lights up a little so we can see through the black helicopters up here. It'd be nice. Let's start at the back of it. There's been some pretty sharp lines drawn about public schools and charter schools. Charter schools are public schools, folks. They're not private schools. They're not for-profit. They're public schools. They're funded with public dollars, and they're public schools. And they follow the laws that we do. The kids follow the same protocols for graduation. They have to meet the same standards that the other schools do. So let's get that really clear. They fall there. There's some great charter schools. You heard some arguments about collaboration. We tried that last year. We tried it this year. Do you know who doesn't show up? The public schools, because they treat it like war. It is, we're going to educate the kids and we're the monopoly in town and you can do it our way or you don't do it. That's how we've ended up to where we're at. I'm going to be honest with it. We've worked with downstairs, we've worked with others, we've invited others. And all they say is you can't do it. And the other one you hear is, well, you're getting something that we don't have. And my answer is this: do you punish everybody or do you change it so that it works better? And this is the first start towards better. Back to the exemptions. I ask you to open your bill up and we're going to read. I'm going to sit down a tiny bit, go to page 12. And all these exemptions you're talking about, here's the statement that starts it. Pursuant to the terms of the charter contract and except as otherwise provided in this article, a charter school shall be a part of the system. Except as provided in this article, a charter school shall not be subject. What it says is they have a contract. They're not blanket exempt from it. It says we need to be exempt from it. Here's what we want exempted from. And the board will decide whether they do it or not. Folks, this board's not here to turn out a bunch of dummies. It's to provide school choice. And they're not going to go around and say they can only go 10 days a year, or you can play hooky, or you only go this. They're trying to come up with a system that educates kids in a modern basis, in a modern way. Is there going to be some mistakes made? Absolutely. But do we need to stay in the current K-12 system we got that sideboards, that produces some absolutely outstanding kids? That's the other part I want to say. I'm not opposed to the K-12 system we got. It's producing great kids in a great way. Does it provide a perfect education for every kid? And the answer is no. Part of what I did. The district I live in, our kids don't tend to graduate from college. It's not because they're bad kids. It's because Crook County's the best spot in the United States, and they choose to come back and live there, and they don't see why they need a degree to work the way we work. I'm proud of that. My son's not a college graduate, got a great high school degree. I wish he could have learned some different stuff. That's what charter schools allow us to do. This really allows some good choice. The other fallacies about charter schools, they aren't run by for-profit corporations. Yes, they'll help get curriculum from them. Where do we get our K-12 curriculum now? Do you think it's all written in Wyoming? Oh no, we hire consultants, we buy textbooks. It all comes from out of state. Some of that will happen with charters, some won't. Charters do not cherry pick kids out of your district. You're going to hear, well, it's a Christian school or it's a religious school. They're not. They take any child that applies and they use a random number generator to pick them. They don't pick a kid from a certain faith, a certain area. They take handicapped kids, they take special needs kids. They have to. They follow the federal law. That number generator picks them. That's how the kids get picked to go to school if there's more than their seats available. The only option they've got that allows any kind of preference, if your son or daughter is already going to it, it gives a preference to a brother or a sister that want to get into it so you can have both your kids go to the same school or all three of them. Past that, it's a public school. They all get to go. Colors, races, creeds, religions, all of it. They don't go that way. There's all kinds of, like I said, we need the lights up. There's black helicopters about all the things they do. What they do is provide a different education than our K-12 provides now. And like I said, that's not saying they provide a bad one. It provides a different one, and particularly when you go to CTE in some different areas, it's incredibly different. We've got 3 of them that have been applied under the deal. 2 of them are bigger ones in our bigger towns. One of them happens to be at one of our smallest school districts. And I believe, I hope I'm not misquoting, I'll be corrected, if it comes back, over 90% of the students and parents asked to go to the charter instead of the school that's there. Does that speak volumes? The other thing that speaks volumes is we've been there since 2001 with the charter deal. We only had a handful of them. Instantly, we had people lining up when we said, there's a different authorizer and we don't have this hand on the scale. And I get it, they could have got through maybe if they fought hard enough. But as soon as we opened it up, said it's actually an open system, they're lining up. Folks, this is a good bill. It'll require some more down the road. As everything K-12, look at the green books. They weren't all written in one piece for K-12. We're gonna help K-12 existing do what I love to do, which is roll back some of the stupid rules. I went against a lot of these a lot of my life. I'm here to help K-12, but don't penalize charter schools because K-12 doesn't have something. Let's remove it for them and get them in the same place. Good bill, let's move it forward. There'll be a second reading amendment that changes the authorizing board on it. This is a good bill, it's good for Wyoming, and it is unbelievably well supported.
Yeah, we have a committee of the whole amendment. Do you want that read in at this time?
Is it here? I don't.
Will the reading clerk read the amendment?
Senate File 174, Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1, page 10, line 8, delete.
Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1 to Senate File 174. These were just some little technical catches I found on page 10, line 8, deleting the word under this article. This would say, in the event that a charter school's performance or legal compliance is unsatisfactory, the authorizer shall promptly notify the charter and ask them to fix it or close them. So it would remove the words under this article, just to be more broad, including, any other violations that might warrant their revocation or closure. And then on page 19, line 23, it would insert the word immediately upon authorization. This is for those converted charter schools that were authorized under the SLIB, that they would be immediately converted to the new statewide authorizer if this bill were to pass. I'd urge your aye vote.
Question's been called. All those in favor of Senator Ellis's motion to adopt Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1 to Senate File 174 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion passes. Back on the bill. Question's been heard. All those in favor of Senator Driscoll's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report that it do so with the favorable recommendation of Senate File 174. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion passes. Majority Floor Leader Hicks.
Mr. Chairman, I move the Committee of the Whole rise and report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion carried.
Well done, Bob. We have the Committee of the Whole report, please.
Mr. President, your Committee of the Whole, having had under considerations bills on general file, begs leave to report as follows. Senate File 141, do pass. Senate File 80, do pass amended. Senate File 174, do pass amended. Senator Ide, Chairman.
Senator Ide.
Mr. President, I move for the adoption of Committee of the Whole report.
You've heard the motion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Motion carried. Report has been adopted. We're back to bills on second reading. Senate File 1, second reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 1, General Government Appropriations 2.
This may surprise you, there is an amendment. Could we have a first amendment read in, please?
Senate File 1, Second Reading Amendment Number 1, Section 001, Office of the Governor. Pages 5, line 3, delete.
Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, before we start on that, I had a few questions, and I've been working on the answers for them, so I want to pass them along. The senator from Tongue River asked, of the 321, 325, and 327, how much was general file, and how much was 2022, and how much was 2023? So on 321, 100 million was LSRA for 2022, 50 million was general fund 2023. On 325, 75 million was general fund 2022, and on 327, 16 million was general file 2023. So the total was 385 million for 22 and 23. 185 million came out of the general fund. There was a list of community programs that you asked about, where those were being done and how much they were and whatnot. That was sent to you on your email to all senators. So that should answer that question. There was a map showing the business council projects was put on your desk. And I think that was it, Mr. President.
Thank you. We're on second reading amendment number 1. Senator Anderson, this is your amendment. Senator Drew.
Mr. Chairman, I got my able.
We're good. Senator Drew's got it. He's on it as well.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to move standing committee amendment, second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 1 in Section 1, the Office of the Governor, Section 206 of the Department of Education. Good members, this is just kind of a cleanup item. The governor or the chief executive had asked us to move this money from the governor's office to the Department of Education for a education program that later on, upon reflection, the office wanted it back, and so this just moves it back to the governor's office. I urge your favorable support.
Discussion. Question being called on second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 1. All in favor? Oh, this is roll call, excuse me, involves money. 26,000, this is big spending, folks.
Second reading amendment number 1 to the budget bill. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? Aye. Barlow? Aye. Beitman? Aye. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? Aye. Brennan? Aye. Case?
Aye.
Aye. Cooper? Aye. Dockstader? Aye. Ellis? Aye. French? Aye. Murphy? Aye. Guru? Aye. Hicks? Hutchings? Ide? Aye. Jones? Aye. Kinski? Kinski? Aye. Hicks? Aye. Kolb? Aye. Landon? Aye. Larson? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? Aye. President Driscoll?
Aye.
Aye. Closing vote. Closing vote closed. Amendment number 1, 31 aye.
We have another amendment. Could we have the second amendment read in, please?
Senate File.
Senator Anderson.
Mr. President, I had one more question I didn't answer. The senator from Tongue River asked on page 14 and page 73 of the bill that Business Council requested, he asked where the 30 million came from to make up to 46 million. The Business Council requested 60 million and the governor recommended 30. The JEC adopted the 30 of the governor's rec. Thank you.
Thank you. Second reading amendment number 2, please, or
Senate File 1, second reading amendment number 2. I beg your pardon, that's number 20. Section under consideration is section 006, Administration and Information, page 15, line 8 under.
Senator Kinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move amendment number 20 to Senate, first reading amendment number.
Corrections, amendment number 2.
Oh, excuse me.
20?
Second amendment reading number
I'm sorry.
20.
My bad.
To Senate File 1 and urge the body's favorable consideration. This involves the State Office Building in Casper, the brand-new, very pretty one. And this was a request for $136,000 for security guard. And I think when we walked through the budget, I think I had mentioned to you that there was a feeling among some that before we start hiring security guards here, there, wherever, we should have a clear policy as to when a security guard is or is not warranted. So I would urge the body's favorable consideration to vote aye to decrease this appropriation. We can always reconsider it after the interim when we've had an opportunity to come up with some kind of coherent policy in where and when we hire security in state office buildings all across the state of Wyoming, not just this one. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Questions? Senator Lambert.
Mr. President, thank you. Just real quickly, approximately 400 of our state employees are in that building, including probation and parole. So that's what spawned this request that came up through A&I. Just a point of information. Thank you.
Yeah, anything with dollars. Yep, got her. Thank you. Further questions? Question being called. We are on second reading amendment number 20 to Senate File 1. There's dollars involved. Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Second reading amendment number 20, Anderson? No. Baldwin? No. Barlow? Aye. Beitman? Aye. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? Aye. Brennan? Aye. Case? No. Cooper? No. Dockstetter? Aye. Ellis? Aye. French? Aye. Furphy? Aye. Guru? No. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. Ide? Aye. Jones? Aye. Kinski? Aye. Cole? Aye. Landon? No. Larson? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Rothfuss? No. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? No. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? Aye. President Driscoll?
Aye.
Aye. Hicks?
No.
Hicks, aye to no?
No, he was standing for other.
He was standing to let us go to lunch.
Baldwin? Baldwin, no to aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Second reading amendment number 20, 24 aye, 7 no.
Second reading amendment number 20 to Senate File 1 has passed the Senate. Senator Hicks, Majority Floor Leader Hicks, excuse me.
Mr. President, I move that the Senate beg leave and rise to sit again at 1:15.
Are there any announcements? Senator Beitman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your committee number 3, Revenue, will meet tomorrow, Thursday, February 2nd, upon noon recess in Capitol Extension Room W6. Take up the following 2 bills, the last 2 Senate files we have in our hopper. Senate File 171, Wyoming Second Amendment Financial Privacy Act, and Senate File 135, Repeal Gun-Free Zones, Government Buildings and Meetings. Thank you, sir.
Senator Dockstader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your committee number 9, Minerals, meeting upon the noon recess in just a few minutes. Committee, please inhale your food so that we can deal with House Bill 61 engrossed source material associated with mining agreement, House Bill 50 solid waste cease and transfer program funding, and as time allows, House Bill 69 engrossed coal-fired facility closures litigation funding amendments. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your committee number 5, Agriculture, State and Public Lands and Water Resources, will meet Thursday, February 2nd upon adjournment in Capitol Room 2 and online to consider the following bills: Senate File 148, Preemption of Local Firearms Regulation, Senate File 149, Enhanced Concealed Carry Permit for Improved Reciprocity, and Senate File 150, Capital Carry. Thank you.
Senator Baldwin.
Mr. President, your committee number 10, Labor, Health and Social Services. This is the first warning of a meeting on Friday. Friday morning, 8 a.m., room 6 and online. We'll hear Senate File 144, Chloe's Law, Children, Gender Change Prohibition, followed by Senate File 162, Grace Smith Medical Freedom Act, as time allows.
Thank you. Senator Case.
Mr. President, thank you very much. Your committee number 7 is still buried, but we're working our way out of it. And tomorrow morning at 7 a.m., we'll take up, continue Senate File 163, Election Integrity Primary Elections, Senate Joint Resolution 11, Convention of States. And those are both continued from Monday. Then we're going to take up Senate File 140, Building Code Requirements Refrigerants, and then Senate File 147, Government Contracts Labor Organizations. And if time permits, we're going to take up Senate File 160, Tolling Authority for I-80. Then we're going to meet for a new meeting at the noon recess where we'll finish discussion of Senate File 142, Carbon Capture and Sequestration. That's continued from last Friday. And then it's continued from Monday, I'm sorry, January 30th. Upon adjournment tomorrow night, we will take up any business left in the committee to finish all the bills.
Thank you, Senator.
It's all in one W110, the soundproof room.
Thank you, Senator Kinski.
I'll go after Senator Schuler.
Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Senate Committee number 6, TRW, will only take up one bill right now on Thursday, unless we get something in the meantime. It'll be House Bill 104, the hunting of predatory animals and amendments, and I think we'll start at 9 o'clock unless we get some more bills. Thank you.
You'll get more.
Privilege of the floor.
Yes.
One of our Senate colleagues asked a question. Could they run an amendment on a department or an agency that was not in the supplemental budget? And the answer is yes. Not that I'm encouraging it, but I just want to make sure that everybody fully understands. And to emphasize again, any questions you have about the budget or how to prepare an amendment, in addition to staff, other members of the Appropriation Committee are prepared to help. And there's also former members of the Appropriations Committee. Senator Dockstader has served on appropriations. Senator Driscoll served on appropriations. I'm not sure who all else here has served, but we want to make sure that everybody feels they have a full and fair chance to participate in the budget deliberation process. And I'd like to meet with the Senate Appropriations Committee informally in 311 at 12:45. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Chairman Kinski. Senator Case.
Mr. President, I'm not sure if I said, but we'll start tomorrow morning at 7 a.m.
You did. Thank you. Are there any further announcements? You've heard the motion. All in favor, say aye. Those opposed, no. Senate shall stand recessed till 1:15.